clear to this House that Mr Foss and Honourable Mr Dunn have got wrong. Labor never supported an increase in GST. Labor will never support an increase in GST, and this bill is not about an increase in GST. This bill is not about an increase in GST because, Mr Chair, if it was about an increase in GST, we would be opposing this bill with every single fibre in our body, like the vast majority of New Zealanders have done. I want to make that abundantly clear now, and we did oppose the increase in GST, and we would do it again if it was up there, I'll tell you that. But, Mr Chair, we do support this bill and its SOPs, but there are three things that I would like to specifically comment on. This bill is actually necessary to ensure the integrity of tax legislation, but also about doing business and making transfer of relatively easy of saving funds across the Tasman. The second point is what an absolute shambles this whole implementation of GST has been. And the third point is where the hell is the government's plan? What is the plan for savings and what is the plan for this economy? But there's a couple of things I would like to say beforehand, Mr Chair. Mr Foss stood up and spoke about honesty. Well, I can tell this House, Phil Goff, our leader, would never stand in front of the nation and say, like Mr Key said, National will not increase GST, and then increase GST. It must make Mr Foss feel rather uncomfortable whenever he watches that video where he sees Mr Key say to the nation, National will not increase GST. And those members have the nerve to stand up and lecture Labor on honesty. Well, that is the reason why Mr Key will be a one-term Prime Minister and why Mr Goff will be the next Prime Minister of New Zealand, because he has integrity and he is an honest man. And then we had Mr Gilmore, unbelievable. Mr Gilmore stand up and say, why would you take GST off rates? It's only $25 a week. He stands up and says, my household can bear that. My household can bear that. Well, I challenge Mr Gilmore. I challenge Mr Gilmore for 1 month, to live on the median wage in his electorate, which I think is around $30,000, just for 1 month. And then I would challenge him to come back and tell this House that $25 a week isn't much money. And we had Jermaine and Foss from the Bay stand up and shout it down. They don't think, they are so out of touch, they don't think the people of Hawke's Bay want to decrease or want the increase in their rates. Well, I can tell Mr Tremaine and Mr Foss that I challenge them actually to have a public meeting and explain to the people of the Bay why an increase in GST on their rates is necessary. And I'll tell you what, no one in the Bay wants an increase in GST on their rates. Because I can say one thing, this increase in their rates is not going towards the City Council coffers at all. It is going to the government. People of Napier are going to pay more in their rates, and not 1 single cent of that is going to go to the City of Napier. Not 1 single cent. It is going to go to the 6% of people in Napier, only 6% of people in Napier who earn over $70,000. So don't talk to me about honesty. And as for Mr Gilmore, wow, that is one man who was way out of touch. He's on $134,000 and he stands up and says, an increase in my rates, that won't make any difference to my household. Well, I can tell Mr Gilmore, he is one of the lucky few in this country, one of the lucky few who is on a salary of that level. He is one of the lucky few who is about to get a tax cut of about $100 a week. If you're on the minimum wage in his electorate, you're about to get $3 a week. And he says $25 a week means nothing. Well, Mr Gilmore, you live on that median wage. Now, I'd like to talk about what this bill does and the reason why we actually are supporting this bill. This bill introduces changes to the tax rules to allow New Zealanders returning home from Australia to bring their retirement savings. Mr Chair?
take the member who hasn't called, Ms. Hatasamaloto Inga.